Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Wednesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. Still nothing. Next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. It's always free. It's never behind a paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where over 24,000 subscribers are wondering when the Lakers are just going to do something, do anything. Whether it's to change the roster around a little bit, Andy, or hey, how about adding an assistant coach? How about filling out that coaching staff? How about getting on that?
Yeah, we'll get into this in more detail. But during the introductory press conference for Dalton Knecht and Bronny James, it flew under the radar. But JJ Redick basically said like he's still filling out his staff. And while I assume that I assume that it was not fully filled out because we haven't heard these sort of names. It would get reported, but I thought maybe like, all right, they got like one or two guys there. They're just waiting to announce everyone. It seems like there's nobody. Like, it seems like the only member of the staff, our quasi-member of the staff so far is, I believe his name is Dane Johnson, the South Bay Lakers coach who's going to be coaching he's going to be coaching the summer league team. He's kind of like JJ's quasi-assistant coach, I think.
And Kurt.
And Kurt, yes.
And Kurt.
He wears many hats in that building.
He is in the building, and right now he's the lead assistant, as far as I can tell.
Mm-hmm.
Do want to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On Lakers is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. All right, so you mentioned it. We will talk about the lack of action. There are no moves to break down, which is kind of the point. And we'll get into that. We'll get into of all the things, the roster is obviously a big deal, and when can they do this? And DeMar DeRozan is now being linked to other teams and maybe only sign a 1-year deal, and there's a lot going on. Not much has really changed. I don't think I can't think of. Were there any trades or anything like anything big happen on Tuesday? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, Kyle Anderson is in a signing trade,
right.
going from the Wolves to the Warriors, which, by the way, explains at least in part why the Warriors ultimately couldn't land on or didn't want to do a sign-in trade with the Lakers for Klay Thompson. They were keeping that space open in the form of an exception. And I believe that is how they ultimately ended up getting Kyle Anderson. So beyond whatever lack of interest one assumes they had in reuniting with D'Lo, it was really about, we wanted to keep that available. They also are apparently Shams just dropped this about 10 minutes ago. There are serious talks going on right now between the Sixers and the Warriors for sign and trade with Buddy Hield, which really lets you know, Brian, just how dormant things are for the Lakers. They're not even generating obligatory Buddy Hield rumors.
Yeah.
And I don't even want Buddy Hield, but give me a little zazz, Lakers. Give me a little showmanship. This used to be your time of year. What the F is going on, man? I don't even want the guy. I would actually be kind of unhappy if they signed him, but that's not the point.
Right. I want to believe that I could have him if I want, which I don't.
Look, it's part of the dance. The dance includes getting linked to Buddy Hield. Now we're not even getting the dance.
Yeah. It's a little disappointing, but so the Lakers
used to make things, Brian.
Yeah. So it was a relatively slow day Tuesday on sort of the NBA market in terms of signings and things like that. But the Lakers are still in exactly the same spot they were over the weekend, which is needing to clear roster space, needing to find ways to improve the roster, trying to use this sort of expiring offer from LeBron to take less money if they can find an impact player. That there's a clock on that thing. And it doesn't mean that they're not trying. It doesn't mean that they aren't working the phones and all these other things, but they're not getting anything done to this point. And again, under the radar, while all this is happening, the Lakers do not have a coaching staff. And so it was like, people were a little surprised maybe when they heard that Redick wouldn't be coaching. Like there was some belief that maybe Redick would coach the summer league games, just get a little bit of sideline experience and all that. So you can't. He's got to like sift through resumes.
Yeah, I would have liked to see him coach the summer league team just for the reps. I don't think it is like a big deal.
No, it's not a big deal at all.
But I mean, all things being equal, I would have preferred that he did it just again for the low pressure reps. But I don't think it's a big deal that he's not.
Honestly, I think they really need whatever time it takes to prepare properly to do that is like time that they need to go towards filling out their coaching staff. So
speaks to why they should have done this 2 months ago. But
I mean,
I digress.
Yeah, it seemed like he was there. Anyway, they did introduce Dalton Knecht, and by the way, I'm finally reaching a place where I've in my own brain no longer calling him Dylan, which I'm very excited about.
Here's the greatest reason not to call him Dylan. For some reason, you and I landed on this weird habit of calling him Dylan Knecht as opposed to Dalton Knecht. This was the single greatest nugget revealed in that press conference. After they did the large media scrum, Dalton Knecht talked with our buddy Mike Trudell, sideline reporter for the Lakers, works for the team. Dalton Knecht, his first name is from Roadhouse. Dalton.
He's actually named after Roadhouse.
He is actually named after Patrick Swayze's character in Roadhouse. Dalton Knecht confirmed this. When they drafted Dalton Knecht, I immediately uploaded, the Dalton from Roadhouse GIF just because I want to amuse myself and I'm a massive Roadhouse fan. Dalton Knecht is now the single greatest Laker draft pick in franchise history. Like, apologies to Magic, West, Kobe, but you're all competing for second now.
Magic. I thought you were going to tell me he had a pain don't hurt tattoo or something like that, which would be really cool. So he and Bronny James were introduced on Tuesday in El Segundo, and I think it's fair to say that a lot of the attention went as you would probably expect. Not all of it, but it wasn't a Frank Vogel introductory press conference, but a lot of attention going to the 55th pick, Bronny James, and a lot of the questions for Bronny James were centered around his dad. So it was just a taste of sort of at least the early days of what this is going to look like for Bronny and the Lakers and what they have to navigate. But the flip side of that is the Lakers are reportedly set to give Bronny a multi-year deal, presumably 3 years, probably with an option or something like that, locking him into that sort of security that 55th picks don't always get. So that's the trade-off that Bronny has when it comes to the Lakers.
Yeah. There was a lot that I thought was really interesting in this press conference with Bronny and with Dalton Knecht. LeBron James was there for those who weren't aware of it. He was off to the side with Rich Paul. They were both watching. There were a few times where Bronny looked a bit irritated, maybe too strong, but getting to kind of eye-rolling territory about like, okay, another question about me and dad, like father-son. And it's like, on one hand, I get it. I get why that would get old. And I want to just make it clear. I thought Bronny, we'll talk about some of the reasons why. I thought he acquitted himself in this press conference really well. Like, I thought Bronny presented himself very, very well during this thing. But this is what he signed up for. Like, he signed up for this narrative, these sort of questions, this type of, non-basketball obsession to some degree with him being on this team. And again, he was not bratty about it. He was not, anything other than, I think, professional, but you could tell at times that he was just like, all right, seriously, we're going to ask one more about this, but this is, as mobsters say, this is the life we chose.
We'll talk about this when we get back. Like, I think to some degree, like the way he talked about it gives you some insight into what the Lakers and other teams presumably that interviewed liked about him. But it'll just be it will be interesting to watch how the Lakers handle this, because the thing about it is Bronny isn't going to be playing with his dad much at all because he's not going to be on the team on a day-to-day basis. He's going to be playing in the G League. We'll talk about it when we get back.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by Game Time. And when I was about 12 years old, the Police were on the Synchronicity Tour. Really, really hot ticket, probably the biggest tour in the world. And I couldn't get seats, but I didn't think it was a big deal at the time because I'm like, just catch the next Police tour. But they broke up right after it. And I eventually saw Sting. He was awesome, but it's not the same thing as the Police. And I learned after that experience, when it comes to a live show that I want to see, a live event, Carpe Diem, do not miss out. It's why I love Game Time. Fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy shows, and theater near you. Killer deals on last-minute tickets and the best price guarantee. You can stop stressing over the tickets. Start getting hyped for the fun. They got flash deals where you save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. And the Game Time guarantee means you always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, Game Time credits you 110% of the. They are the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Snag the tickets without the stress using Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off the first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guarantee.
So, I mean, presumably if the Lakers use the 55th pick on anybody, they would, they could have given them a two-way. Bronny is certainly an exception. I'm not going to say he's the exception. There were a lot of people they probably would have drafted with, at 55 that also would have been signed to a standard contract. But there's no question that the Lakers used a roster spot. We're committing to using a roster spot when they drafted Bronny. And so, when you're a team with a roster crunch, that is certainly worth noting. But in terms of Bronny's impact on the roster, that's the biggest impact right there. Like, that's it. That's sort of where it stops. He is a developmental player. He is somebody who's going to play in the summer league. He is going to spend the vast majority of his season, unless he wildly outplays his draft position.
Or there's a bleak ton of injuries.
Right, or there's a ton of injuries. I was about to say, if you see a lot of Bronny James, overwhelmingly that likely means that things have gone totally haywire. And so a lot of this talk is really about like them hanging out together in the facility, because that's where most of the on-court stuff is going to happen.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. There was a moment where I don't remember which reporter, but somebody asked Rob Pelinka and JJ Redick. I don't remember what the question was with Bronny, but it was phrased as being given an opportunity to do something. And JJ Redick said, like, I'll answer the question, but I want to go back to the original thing. Bronny was not given anything. He earned this. Like, he has earned this opportunity, and, kind of continuing that company line. And what I thought was really interesting about it is, when you hear Bronny talk, he comes off as very smart, very thoughtful, very grounded, and like somebody that does not take being the son of LeBron James as I'm going to be given everything, even if in the back of his head he recognizes there's a lot that's going to be in front of me opportunity-wise because I am the son of LeBron James. But he talked about, he's put a lot of premium on defense, and that's considered the thing right now that most people think will keep him in the league if he manages to stick. And he talked about how, defense, one of the reasons he put so much pride into it is it's often what creates offensive opportunities for his team. And he talked a lot about work and stuff like that. And there's this interesting contrast, I think, with Bronny, where you can, I think, reasonably debate the idea of whether or not he earned this because were he not the son of LeBron James, there would not be certainly the same opportunities and the same contract security and the same, asks that his agent was able, or demands even, that his agent was able to make. But that doesn't mean he didn't work to get here. And one thing I do think, just to be fair to Bronny, that people need to be cognizant of, it may not be entirely earned, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't work behind it.
Right. And also, I mean, there were other teams that I think would have drafted him if Rich Paul wasn't doing what he was doing. I mean, I think a lot of teams viewed it as not worth the trouble, like in terms of, you don't want to make Rich Paul angry. You don't want to set yourself up to be in a position where if the pick doesn't want to come, he's going to go play somewhere else, like whatever it might be. But like, before his heart thing and it went to USC, he was, if you go back to last year, a fringy first round pick on a lot of these draft rankings. Like, it wasn't like this guy came out of literally nowhere, or like, just started playing a couple of years ago or something like that. But, it will, there'll be talk starting next, later in the week, really, about, finally we get to see the player and like, what does he look like? What does he play? How does he do that stuff? Does he look like the 50th pick in the draft? Kind of appropriate there. And like, if he completely is terrible, like there'll be chatter. If he plays like a second round pick is supposed to play, then that'll quiet it down for a little while. But the Lakers need to figure out how to temper this a little bit. The bigger thing, obviously, for right now, Andy, was some of the comments from Rob Pelinka when he noted that the Lakers and the NBA are now living in apron land, or apron world, I should say, which sounds like a section of Sur La Table or something. Maybe, I'm not sure, but I think he means it's just really hard to get certain things done in apron world when you're trying to make trades or sign guys or do stuff. No question, the optionality is limited, but the Lakers knew they were entering apron world before the offseason. Other teams are in apron world and are making little moves here and there.
So just to be clear, the other 29 teams are also in apron world?
They are.
It's not just the Lakers?
It's not just the Lakers.
Okay, because for a long time, I'm like, man, that's not fair. Like, first you veto the Chris Paul deal, and now you put the Lakers as the only team in apron world. Like, Jeannie, what are you taking this for? But now I get it. It's all the teams. And it's like, it's one of these things, like I think we talked about a little bit on Tuesday's show. It's like, in a vacuum, yes, all of these things, it's reasonable. Like you said, you mentioned, why didn't the Warriors want to do a sign and trade with the Lakers? Well, they had other players that they wanted more. They had something that they wanted to do for Kyle Anderson. That they have preferences, and you can't make teams, but when you start to put all of them over and over again, loss after loss after loss, or near miss after near miss after near miss, at some point, you've got to, this is his job, man. And it's a hard job. Again, aside from the part about not ever getting fired, but I mean, nobody said it was easy, but that doesn't make the job less difficult. It just means you don't worry about job security as much.
Right.
Like, the job's still hard.
Well, the job is, like, independently, the job is hard.
Yeah, I mean,
you don't have to get that stressed over.
No, like, being president of the United States is incredibly hard, but I mean, we really truly learned you're gonna get the 4 years. Like, it doesn't matter what you do, you are going to get those 4 years, and it's an incredibly difficult job.
Yeah, so they've got to figure something out. They just need to hire a coach. I mean, they got to get going on stuff. Like, they are slow. And look, the offseason is an entire stretch of time. It is not the first 3 days or 3.5 days now of the free agency period. There are going to be more trades. There are going to be, still players that haven't been claimed. And I think things are just going to go slower in apron world than they used to before that. And the Lakers offseason, it isn't done. It's just not off to a very promising start.
One last thing before we go to break, and I know we're going to talk about this further, just the slow goings and what hasn't been happening, what could be linked to the Lakers. I thought Bronny gave one more really interesting response when he was asked about just the added spotlight now on him playing with LeBron and the scrutiny and the eyeballs and all that stuff. He acknowledged both that this is something he's been dealing with his whole life, and he is aware of what's being said about him, whether in media, internet, whatever, but also acknowledged that it's amplified pressure. And I thought that was a really good response. Basically like, look, this is nothing new for me, and it's kind of the world that I'm used to, but I'm not going to BS everybody and pretend that there's no extra pressure in this situation, which again, I thought reflected very well on Bronny, just his overall maturity and stuff. We'll see what becomes of him as a player, but seems like a pretty good kid, which was nice to see.
Yeah. So, that is another example of the trade that the James camp clearly decided was the way they wanted to approach this.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's get into a little bit more of why it is the Lakers are stuck, why they appear to be stuck, and how they might actually be able to get unstuck. That's next. So they have a glut of players that are tricky to move. All the option guys came in. We mentioned the Bronny contract that is certainly relevant, at least in terms of opening up space for one guy. By the way, the Lakers are not precluded from signing people. It's just that, generally speaking, you want to have space to sign someone into, so you aren't, potentially on the hook for having to cut a guy or things like that. You don't want to have extra players under contract, because then you're really negotiating from a position of tremendous weakness. So, the Lakers have guys that they need to move, but on the other hand, I'm sure aren't super excited at the prospect of having to use a second round pick to get rid of Cam Reddish. Like, that's not appealing.
Yeah. I mean, they have one expiring deal, D'Lo, that is of import just in terms of its size, like that you can actually trade it as the central part of bringing back an impact player. The rest of their expirings are all vet minimum guys. Mm-hmm. I believe in the new CBA, there are limits to how much you can actually lump those guys together. So they truly, they don't have a lot of value in and of themselves other than filler, really, or if a team wants an extra 1 or 2 second round picks for the, pleasure of taking on Christian Wood. Like, they don't have a lot of value by themselves, and they can't even be combined together past a certain point. So as we talked about, that limits the Lakers' options. The idea that some of their mid-sized deals, D'Lo, Rui, Vando, these are 3 of their top 6 players. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't make them untouchable, but it means you can't just trade them willy-nilly, because they represent the upper end of talent, and you don't want to be just making lateral moves, particularly if making lateral moves requires attaching assets on top of it. Like, if, say, you're going to attach a first to D'Lo for what is really like a lateral or a mild upgrade, I don't think that's a good use of the asset.
No,
like
not when you're limited. Yeah.
As you often say, you only get to trade these picks once.
It's true. And like Russell even is a guy who is a good player. I mean, in terms of tiers of where you are in the NBA, he's sort of in that. I mean, yes, I know he's been an all-star, but he's probably not going to be an all-star ever again. And he's, in that sort of tier below. He's good. He's a very good
top
player.
100 player, which means he's like in the upper quarter or higher of the league.
Correct.
That makes you really good.
But between his reputation and, some legitimate shortcomings in his game, he's not somebody that really good teams are going to be tripping over themselves to get, because he's not good teams probably don't need him and are wary of the reputation. Bad teams probably don't want him because, why? Why are you giving minutes to D'Angelo Russell? He's not so young that you look at him as a, developmental piece or something like that, or a guy to grow with a young roster or something like that. I'm not saying he doesn't have some value, but like he just, you don't look at him, there's a narrower window. And like, especially if you don't think he's somebody who would react well to coming off the bench or things like that are relevant. And so that dampens the market. And expiring contracts, I just don't think are as valuable as they used to be. So, I mean, even little things like that are impactful, but we talk about, did you, were you something that you wanted to say about that? Because I also had a point to make about the Reddish thing.
Oh, just really quick, with D'Lo too, it makes it complicated for, say, the Nets have been linked to the Lakers, and I know we brought up the idea of like Dorian Finney-Smith or, Cam Johnson reuniting D'Lo with the Nets or whatever. If, they're moving into a rebuild, obviously after trading Mikal Bridges, it's D'Lo not only doesn't fit in with their rebuild, you also have to be concerned about he's playing for another contract. So he may be a little too good for what you need. It's like when the Lakers were pretending, at least, that they were trying to convince people that they were rebuilding in Kobe's last few years, even though they were desperately chasing 8 seeds, and just falling ass backwards into lottery picks. They gave that away when you brought in Lou Williams. If you're rebuilding, you don't bring in Lou Williams. Lou Williams can get too hot on his own, where all of a sudden you win a game or two that you don't want to.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I wonder things too. It's like you go back to the decision making when you start talking about, the Lakers being stuck because they used the option year to entice some of these 1-and-1 guys. And look, maybe that's what the market required last year. Like if you wanted Jackson Hayes, maybe you needed to offer Jackson Hayes an option year to get him. I question like Christian Wood. I actually do kind of get it. Like, he had options. He's a guy who was he
may not have had that many options. He took a long time before he got signed.
He did, but like I assume there were probably a fair amount of teams who were willing to offer him the minimum, or more teams, I should say, that would be willing to offer him a minimum. And perhaps that's when the Lakers at that point, really did need another big. Mm-hmm. They were entering the season with Jackson Hayes as the only viable backup to. So, I mean, I get it. On what planet do you need to incentivize Cam Reddish to come to your team? Like if Reddish had said, you know what, guys, without that option year, I'm going to go sign over there. Okay. I mean, those kinds of like, why are we doing that? Why are we giving Cam Reddish an option?
Do you want my theory?
Sure.
Clutch client. It's clutch client.
Okay.
I mean, he'd been linked to the Lakers for a long time.
For a million years. No, I get it.
For reasons
I've never
that felt
understood.
Pretty inexplicable to begin with. That's my guess is clutch client. And these were the parameters that they dealt with. And look, good for Rich Paul for if I'm correct, and I want to stress, I do not know this. This is me recklessly speculating from a place that I think is relatively reasonable. But that's Rich Paul's job. Good for him for doing it. But if that's my guess.
Sure. I mean, but like the Lakers have not signed clutch clients before. Like
Sure.
It's not like they literally signed every single guy. Like they
but they do sign a lot of them.
They don't.
But a lot of times they do.
That's true.
A lot of times they do, Brian.
But like those are unforced errors. Like I try to be as fair and open-minded as possible with these things and really remember I'll go back to Darvin Ham and last season and like the uproar people now, which I think is honestly revisionist history about Austin Reeves being benched. And you go back to the context, and we're doing shows every day and looking at the YouTube channel every day. People were livid at the start the Lakers had, and they were upset that they weren't trying something different. You're just going to keep running the same thing out there over and over and over again. Got to try something. How long are we going to do this and let the Lakers lose? All of this stuff. And meanwhile, Reeves was terrible at the beginning of the season. He was terrible.
Yeah.
And then he went to the bench. And by the way, it kind of got him going. Like, whether it's coincidence, that, whatever, it kind of worked. Like, the Lakers won some games, and they and Reeves started to play better and all that stuff. So, like, in the moment, a lot of individual decisions can sometimes make sense, or you at least see the POV when it comes to personnel moves and stuff like that. But the idea that you feel like you have to incentivize Cam Reddish to come to your team, he's not been a quality NBA player. And they could have absolutely signed an equivalent to him without that option.
Yeah, I mean,
and I think, and I'd love to know if who could they have had other than Jackson Hayes, if the option was required to get Hayes.
To be fair to Rob, and this is me again, not knowing all of the cap machinations and all the rules.
Sure.
But wondering if maybe this was part of the rationale. Malik Monk dramatically overplayed his veterans minimum deal. And because of that, they had no avenues whatsoever to keep him. I wonder if maybe they wanted to give these guys an extra year to where maybe they could say, look, you opt in one more, that money's coming the following year, like, just to be able to keep them around. Maybe that's the rationale. It may not be. It may have been just bad decision making. I'm wondering if perhaps that was part of the thought process.
I wonder if they looked at that example, and said, like, just assume that they could turn these guys into players that would,
Maybe.
outplay. It was just guaranteed. Like, you come to the Lakers, like, they're going to do so well. Like, the Lonnie Walker, Malik Monk thing was going to be like how it worked.
It may be similar to what we've talked about before with the idea of LeBron potentially negotiating his next deal, like, opting out, then opting in, whatever, where he would get a no trade clause, which if I'm the Lakers, I'll happily give LeBron,
sure,
because they're never going to trade him without his express wishes to the place that he wants to go. Right. So
without the expressed written consent of Major League Baseball.
Right. So I don't care about giving LeBron a no trade clause, because I'm never going to trade him against his will. They may have felt like, I don't care about giving a second year on this veterans minimum, because these guys are going to dramatically outplay it anyway. We'll benefit from it. And if we lose them, we lose them.
Right, but the assumption is, but like, you got to pick the right horses for that. And I don't even think Hayes played poorly, but like,
I don't either.
I think it was reasonable to believe that Jackson Hayes wouldn't play so well that he would be able to opt out of a when he signed it. Like, there's a good chance I thought it was going to be useless. So you have to question the wisdom, not necessarily of the guys they signed. Veterans minimums are definitionally, you're limited in who you can get. You have to question the wisdom of what you're willing to offer some of these guys, and whether or not the difference between Jackson Hayes and player B, who wouldn't have required an option year if that's what was required, how big that gap was. Because I don't think it was worth the option year, what we're learning. So at least in terms of your future flexibility. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 24,000 befuddled subscribers, bored even, wondering when the Lakers are going to do something, poking the Lakers with a stick. We will be back tomorrow. Hopefully the Lakers do something. 4th of July weekend. Remember, Andy, when the Lakers spoiled 4th of July by with the Nash thing? We had to go back to work. Maybe
you had to go back to work. I was out of town on vacation. I didn't do a damn thing. Oh my
God, it was my wife mad at me. But maybe the Lakers will ruin another holiday. Maybe they could do that. I'd be on board. We'll see. But either way, we'll be back tomorrow. Everyone have a great day.